In any discussion of partnerships, it's also very valuable to understand outsourcing as a unique and very viable opportunity and category or type of partnership. When we look at outsourcing, it can happen in a variety of ways. There are vertical opportunities to engage with. There are transferring existing or entire pieces or business functions to a partner. There are various types of outsourcing. It might be contract-based. It might be business process or IT. It might be innovation outsourcing, and that you're engaging others to assist in your product development or design. So in that way, when we think about outsourcing, historically it's been thought more of manufacturing or perhaps call centers or very specific or very narrow areas. But today, there's a global environment and global platforms that we'll talk about that are particularly viable for new ventures to be able to find partners and outsource relationships in and beyond your country boundaries. Why do we do it? One, there might be expertise. And a lot of firms do this with law, with accounting. Why don't we have an attorney or an accountant full-time in every startup?
Because you don't really need an attorney 24.
You don't have the need for a full-time attorney or a full-time accountant. What else don't you have?
The money to pay him.
You don't have the money. You don't have the money to pay someone full-time. And even if you did, if you don't have the need, that money's probably better spent elsewhere, paying for other things. So again, we outsource quite a bit, even if we're just outsourcing it to someone that's down the street from us. It's a different skill set. It's a different expertise. We outsource manufacturing largely because of economies of scale. We may not have the money to buy a big machine, and even if we did, we probably don't have the demand to run that machine all the time. So let's find people that own and operate the machines and buy the amount of time on that we need. And it may only be an hour or two a day. So again, you're finding people that have the expertise, the resources, the know-how that we don't. How you find them comes in many flavors. Elance is one of the popular online outsourcing matchmaking firms, and they report to have had $815 million of transactions on their site across 91,000 jobs, 91,000 projects of individuals and small companies finding one another. They claim 176,000 programmers, 192,000 writers. If I need content written for my site, if I need content written for marketing materials and brochures, if I need mobile, 20,000 developers. And so in this model, what you see here is that the 91,000 jobs is actually posted in the last 30 days. So it gives you a sense of magnitude, and that there is a lot of matchmaking, and they feature different people in the promos. So we have an Argentinian that's doing mobile app development. Why do I find somebody in Argentina to do my mobile app development when there may be someone right here in Maryland that can do that?
Might be cheaper.
Might be a price advantage. There might be a skill advantage. I'm looking for something specific or unique. There might be a time advantage of I want it this week, this month, and maybe my local person can't do that. Maybe I'm trying to target that market. Maybe I need something that's Spanish language. Maybe I need other things that that person in that region is going to know better than somebody that may be local. Maybe I'm a U.S. firm developing a mobile app for deployment in Argentina. So again, there are lots of different motives and lots of different reasons. Cost is the one that's common, but there may be other advantages as well.
Money is like the fee.
So the fee model is that when you go in and when you look at one of these profiles, and again, if we were to click on this and do our search and pull someone up, we would see skill sets and price points and things of that nature. And what the Elance business model is there's a transaction fee for projects that are served and matched on their site. So they essentially earn a commission for matchmaking.
Why wouldn't you just, contact the guy outside of the site once he's found you on the site?
Typically, a lot of these elements are not posting contact information. So anytime you're doing a business model where you're matchmaking online and you're trying to generate revenues off of that matchmaking, typically you hold contact information hostage until the payment to you has been transacted. And with this model, there are competitors. Odesk is the other big one in this space. And what they're doing is similarly doing matchmaking. They report $257 million of earnings based on matches that they've made, that the average job size is the 4,300. And right now, they have 1,400 people working on projects. And when you see the cities that are represented and the regions that are represented, it's not all just in China. It's not all just in India. There's a lot of activity, a lot of contractors, a lot of people doing work in the U.S. for U.S. firms. And people, again, probably vice versa, people here that are contracting work over here, people here that are contracting work over there. So in that way, again, it happens in this kind of global marketplace these days with outsourcing. And what you see in the level of definition that you can drill down into is you want perhaps somebody that knows software development, that knows mobile apps specifically, that has a feedback score of at least 4.5 on a 5.0 scale. And you get people that are returned that fill those elements. And at present, when I did that, there were 47 people that fit that profile. And then I can look at those 47 if I choose and see what they know by way of skills and programs, what they charge, what they have done by way of portfolio, as in, can I go online and look at past work they performed? So why do I have a $35 person, an $80 person, and a $50 person? Which one do I go with?
Depends. Probably the one with the most experience, which is the $80.
I might go with the person that has a lot of reviews. Yep.
The guy with the most hours.
I might like hours. It seems like maybe they've done fewer projects, but maybe bigger projects, so maybe you equate that with experience. What if I need somebody that knows OmniGraffle? I'm not even sure what OmniGraffle is. How many of those are there? There's one. So there might be a very specific skill set or need that I have that I pay for. Or I may do what? What do we do sometimes when we are resource constrained?
Cheap one.
We go cheap. So in that way, again, you have lots of options. You have lots of options in the space to find people that you hope are a good match. And it's not uncommon that you may find a small piece of your project rather than the whole thing that you're trying to outsource. Give somebody a piece and see how they do. And do they do that well? And if so, if they're responsive, if it's timely, if it's quality, then you may go back to them to do the bigger project. It's not uncommon that you may hire 2 or 3 people to do the same project, a small project, or 3 similar projects. Why might you break things up into bite-sized pieces and give it to different people?
Because they need, maybe the pieces need certain expertises that they have.
Okay, there might be different skill sets, so it's more than one person can do.
So you can see which one is best for the big job.
It also lets you compare. It let me run 3 people at the same time and see who runs the best, and then I can pick that one to do the part 2, the bigger job. So there's a little bit of kind of an art and science in how you do it, but it's important to recognize with outsourcing that it comes in lots of different flavors, that there's a global market for it, and with the Elances and Odesk and things like that that are out there, they're increasingly easier to find and affordable to find. And these, as I search them, I think in one of the earlier filters, I may have clicked US. I'm seeing if there's a geography notation here. You can pick regions that you want to focus in. Yeah, so all of these are in the US. If I expanded that into other international areas, a lot of the rates would drop. So if for some reason you want to work with somebody locally, you want the time advantage, you want to be able to get on the phone, you can do that too. So again, lots of options that you have. So again, many models. There's the offshoring of let me find somebody outside of my home country. There's the kind of the captive element of let me set up operations elsewhere. And there are a number of small startup firms that I'm familiar with that they have a small office in Maryland, and then they have a second office in India. So they're still a small firm. They may have 50 people here and 50 people there. So they have enough work that they want to hire and build an operation abroad. And they've elected to do that in the different region, particularly if it's software or something that can scale and grow beyond their local market. And then there are a variety of other models of where you can set up and partner with people locally. And when JetBlue got started, they located their call center, meaning that if you were to call JetBlue, you want to talk about travel you're trying to make, you have some issue with what you were billed, you have some customer service request or complaint, they set up their call center in Salt Lake City, Utah. Why do we set up a call center in Utah? And we're not only going to set it up in Utah, but we're going to forward the call to people's individual homes. So we're going to have predominantly women working part-time at home in Utah is our call center for JetBlue Airlines. Why would you do such a thing?
Utah?
Utah.
This reason?
It is a religious reason.
That's so messed up.
So in that way, the founder of JetBlue
That
is a Mormon,
messed up.
and he believed that he wanted to create a call center in the U.S. and not international. What was the perception for that? He's not racist. So in that way, why did he want to set up a call center in the U.S. and not abroad, as did many of his competitors?
Because of America.
What do you think?
He's a patriot and wants to give it to them people.
So he wants to keep jobs in the U.S. He wants to create economic development in the U.S. He perceived there to be a language advantage. He wanted the call center to be served by people that had English as a first language and thought that equaled better service. He thought, too, that I can have a cost advantage and that if I can make the job easy, if you can work from home, if you can set your own hours, and if I can hire you in a part-time capacity, I don't bear the cost of full-time people. When do people call airlines? When do you think most people are calling?
Like the night before?
They're calling at night. They're calling weekend. Business travelers may call during the day, but a lot of people are calling off hours. So in that way, too, and he perceived that for the population that he was employing, that there was an interest in working part-time, that there was an interest in working from home. And in that way, it was a model that made sense. Now, as they've grown, as they've expanded, they've gone beyond what that market can serve. But it was an element of kind of creative home shoring, if you will, of he thought that based on the model, based on the needs. Now, you cannot require, legally, you cannot require that someone be of a certain religion to be employable by your company. But you can certainly locate and market if you're trying to target a certain employee that has certain interests. But again, pretty creative solution to find employees that parallel the needs that he had. We see people specialize. So when you go to the ELANTS and you go to the ODesk, a lot of it's technology, but it's a lot of writing and creative, and it's a whole assortment of things. There are some sites that started, and many that are still maintaining, doing but one thing. And there were a number of logo design sites that launched not too long ago. And they would offer a fixed fee model, this model $295, to develop a logo. Is that expensive? $295 for a logo.
Oh, yes.
No.
How do you know if it's expensive?
It sounds expensive.
We'll compare it to other.
It's based on competition. It's based on, well, what are my other options for a logo? If I hire a designer, if I go to a marketing agency, if I go to an ad agency and pay them for a logo, that could be $2,000 or $3,000. Now, I could have my kid do something in PowerPoint for free and I'd get my money's worth. But there's an element of thinking about what my options are. And again, an interesting option at $295. What's more interesting is that they run it as a competition model. Meaning that I specify I am opening a salon. I am serving this type of customer. I'm selling this type of product at this kind of price point. I like red. So you can give some parameters of what it is you would like to see in your logo. You post that, and then if you have 5 logo designers that are members of the site, they can elect to create one or more logos based on the specs that I've created for them. And if I choose one as the winner, if I choose yours as the winner, you get the $295, minus a few percent that 99 Designs keeps. What do the other 4 get? Nothing. It's a competition. Why do 5 people design when there's going to be but one winner? They want to be the winner. They want to be the winner. So you see these other competition type sites that have emerged. Now, someone probably isn't going to design a whole website. Somebody's probably not going to invest weeks of time in a competition model. But for a logo, how long does it take to make one of these logos?
A couple hours.
A couple hours, yeah.
Probably a couple of hours if you are in the business of being a logo designer. At least as a version that you can promote, and then if somebody wants to change a little something with it, you've got the opportunity to tweak it a bit, but it's not days and days of time typically. You can also pay more than $295. $295 may be the minimum. I can offer $495 for my logo. What does that do? You don't get 5, you get 10. Each of those don't submit 2 logos. They may submit 3 or 4 each. So again, it's somewhat of a auction model, so to speak, of that the more you pay, the more interest you're going to get, and the more options you may have. And you choose the winner, and or you have a little link that you can send out to friends and colleagues and family and let them vote on what they like too. So in that way you can do some voting to help you determine what you want to pick. But again, different model of outsourcing, kind of competition based. So with outsourcing, again, as we've talked about, you can save some money. You can focus on what you do well and find other people that do what they do well. You also might be able to access people you otherwise couldn't find or get skills you otherwise wouldn't have. Also, it costs money to hire people. Even if you're going to pay somebody $30,000 a year, you're, depending the size of your company, are really going to be paying more like $40,000. So how does a $30,000 salary cost you $40,000? Where's the other 10 go to?
Benefits.
Benefits, health care, taxes, employment taxes. If you want them to come to work, you have to have space for them to sit in and equipment for them to use and furniture for them to have access to. So there's a lot of other added costs. So you, again, by partnering with people that do that and can do that elsewhere and or do it part-time from home, there might be other cost savings there as well. There are some risk involved. Doesn't always work out. The logos you get aren't always the ones you want. The app that somebody built may not be the app that you thought they were going to deliver. So there's, again, an awareness of that, and that's why with many of these things, you typically, particularly in the beginning, with people you're unfamiliar with, have small projects at small amounts of money, and then you can kind of grow and scale it from there. What a lot of these sites do as well with the Elances and the Odesk, how do you know if work is being done on your software development? Now, if you're going to check in with them once a week and by voice, how do you know that work is being done in the interim, particularly if you're paying them by the hour? You do. How do you know?
You can do desktop sharing.
Okay, you can do desktop sharing and you can stay awake all the time and kind of watch them. I'm going to watch you do work. What's a little bit better than that?
I know I use progress reports when I do stuff like that.
So there's some progress reports. What else might they do?
Well, Odesk has it all built in, where if you're paying somebody on Odesk, you get like a report. You can see their screen like every 10 minutes, and it breaks down their screen into like what programs they're using, and you just see a chart of it.
So you essentially have installed spyware. They're taking screenshots every few minutes, where you can go in and get a report of what's happened in the last hour, week, month, what have you, however long they've been working with you, as related to your project. How do you know if you're working at a company, if you ask an employee to do something, are they working on it during that day? Particularly in this cube environment that we have, how do you know if they're doing anything? Not the same way. We'd be up in arms in the U.S. if their privacy has been invaded at work. Yep.
Can you check on them?
You can keep checking. Do we want to be checked on every 3 minutes by our boss?
Not too bad.
It's awkward. You could argue that with the Elance and the Odesk and some of the technology that they use and have and that people volunteer to engage in gives you better oversight than we have of our own employees that work in our own office. But it's being aware, again, of what's out there.
The last person that voted for lead, do you know who that is?
We'll do it in a minute. So with that way, for the outsourcing, what you want to recognize is that it happens in lots of models, and it happens in lots of ways, and it doesn't always work out. You know, there's risk in any kind of partnership. There's risk in any kind of relationship. You also want to recognize to what extent can you change your mind? To what extent can you drop off with one person and start with another person if need be? If the person building that app isn't working out, are you starting from scratch with the next person? And is what money you've paid kind of gone? Or if they built a piece, then I can use that piece in the next piece. So that's why, again, breaking things into small projects typically works well. There also can be backlash to what you do. When you're thinking about outsourcing, or if to outsource, these are a few critical questions to consider. One I would look at is the criticality of the business function. If you're a technology company if you're a web-based company, if people are paying to use and interact with your software and your web, I would say you probably don't want to outsource your website. You probably need to find people to join your team that are in the business of doing that and doing it well. If you sell socks, and if you're in the business of making socks, it may make a lot of sense to outsource your website. Because all you need is something that looks good, that's kind of brochure-aware of what it is. Maybe you want to have a shopping cart on your site. But the basis of your success is not on how good your shopping cart is or how good your site is, it's the product itself. So in that way, again, it depends on what you're doing, and it depends on the criticality of that to your business. And that's what this is oriented towards, of how mission critical is it? If it goes down, can you fix it? If it doesn't work, are you going to lose customers because of it? And if the answer is yes, you probably want to do that skill and do that resource by the members of your team. If it's things that are somewhat interchangeable, if it's things that are not necessarily mission critical, if it's something you need infrequently, then you may very well outsource that with some frequency. When you think about the nature of the process, there's also the question of being able to recognize, is it hard or is it easy to tell somebody what it is? If you have something that's relatively simple to explain, that's relatively specific in what and how you need it done, and it's not necessarily time critical, that's something that you can hire someone to do. That's something that you may very well outsource very effectively. If it is complex, if there's a lot of customization to it, if it's hard to describe it and kind of hard to do it, it may be the type of thing that you do in-house. There's the kind of the transfer of it related to somewhat the complexity. I think these go hand in hand a bit, of can you explain what it is you want? Can you quantify it? Can you measure it? Can you validate it? Sales is something that you could arguably measure pretty well. And you could hire an outside sales team, and if they sell, they get compensated. If they don't, they don't. So it's a clean line of impact or effectiveness. There's also the element of the intellectual property piece of who owns what, and or what happens if somebody breaks that and runs off with your patents or with your copyrights or trademarks. There's one case of an individual that made disposable diapers, or not disposable, reusable diapers. Reusable diapers. And her model is that there is a cloth diaper which snaps that's on the exterior, and then there's a secondary layer of cloth that goes on the interior. So if you need to change the diaper, you unsnap, then you take the interior part, dump it if it needs to be dumped. Otherwise, you put it in to be laundered later that day. And you replace that little interior piece. It's an insole almost. And you snap that diaper back up, and you're off and running. What do people spend on diapers?
A lot. I have no idea.
It accumulates over time. It's thousands of dollars per baby. You may think it's gross to change a diaper. That's true if it's a disposable diaper or if it's a reusable diaper. So in that way, again, the people that are buying these aren't concerned about is it gross or not. That comes with the baby. But what she did is she found a provider abroad, and before she got her product back to sell it into the market, she had competitors selling the exact same thing. So it does happen. It does happen that if you outsource things to folks you're not familiar with, even if you have a patent, All patents do is give you the right or the beginning of what you need with a lawsuit. You still need to litigate that, and typically hire attorneys to litigate that. So it's something to be aware of. It's something to be cautious of. Particularly, too, with fashion and apparel, hard to get patents that stick because we can just add a third button. We can make it an inch longer. It's fuchsia instead of pink. So again, it's subtle differences that may give people the opportunity to work around patents. We also recognize, again, vendor capabilities and what do people know? What can they accomplish? And do they have the right skills? And that's where references come in as well. Governance, we talked about that a little bit. That's more the contract element. In summary, when you think about outsourcing, there are rich and valuable avenues for new ventures to engage in this. And the outsourcing opportunities and the outsourcing jobs and roles are widely diverse, and they exist in many forms. So I would encourage you to think about that, to think about how you can add value to your customers and add value to your company by finding the right outsourced relationships and partnerships. Also think about the risk. There are inevitably risks when you're doing anything with anyone else, but there are some best practices, as we've discussed here, that you can try and mitigate those risks, that you can think about how do I select the right partners in the beginning, and then how do I put a process in place to manage those outsourced relationships effectively and efficiently.